All right, good to go. Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you for being patient with like the 2 month delay since the last podcast. We got a special guest for you. Got Aidan on today. We're gonna talk about like obviously powerlifting, but obviously hypertrophy is a huge component of that. So we're gonna be breaking down kind of the nuances that go into hypertrophy in powerlifting. So Aidan, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Hey, what's up? Really happy to be on the podcast. I think Colt has provided some questions here that I'm really excited to talk about, and will allow me to share some of the insights that I've gained and the systems that I've built over the 7 years of powerlifting that I've been in, 6 years of coaching experience. For those who don't know me, I'm Aidan. I am the head coach, only coach of Rage Strength, and highest level I've competed at is Junior Worlds. Been powerlifting since I was 17 and started in 2018, and was able to qualify for Junior Worlds back in 2024. Unfortunately, that would have been an awesome competition. I actually got COVID a week before that competition, but if you want to know what kind of numbers I've hit, squatted 694/315 kilo, benched 405/183 kilo, and I've deadlifted 340/750 pounds, and locked out 350 a few times, but I've never been able to hold on to it at the top. Unfortunately, it's always fell out of my hands. But we're gonna get that. But I just wanted to introduce who I am, and excited to answer and dive into what Colt has for me.
Yeah, we can let the 350 pull slide for the podcast because the host kind of uses straps a lot. So in my book, I'll let it slide, I guess. But I thought you'd be a really good person to have on for this one in particular because you going into that 405 bench like had a very unorthodox approach compared to what most powerlifters take. More of like a bodybuilder style approach. And then even like in your current off season, I'm not sure if it's entirely just because you've had some like squat injuries and whatnot. But you're also taking more of a hypertrophy focused bodybuilder looking approach compared to what most powerlifters would. So do you want to talk a little bit about just why maybe you originally had that idea, especially on your bench, and then why you think it worked so well?
So let me set the stage about like the context before I switched to what was the most intense upper body training I've ever had in my entire life. So I benched I think I was like 2020, maybe 2021. Yeah, I was 21 years old, and I benched like 385 on a fat pad, and with like an okay pause. And this was an all-time PR at the time. Or no, I benched 380. It was 380, and then I failed 385 the next week. I remember that. But and that was my PR in like 2021. It took me all the way until I hit like 385 in like sometime in like 2023. And then it took me all the way until like early 2024 to then hit 386. So I basically plateaued on bench for 2.5 years straight. I managed to add 6 pounds to my bench in 3.5 years, which isn't great. But there's a lot of ups and downs. I mean, the biggest factor there, I think, is going to be that life became significantly more challenging with getting into nursing school. That's a big thing. Plus, also managing business. I was like at like anywhere from like 20 to 25 athletes the entire time I was in nursing school. So I used that. I probably pushed myself a little bit harder than I should have with the nursing school, but ultimately I did have to pay rent. I think ideally if I didn't have financial obligations, I would have only coached like 15 to 20 people during nursing school. But you got to do what you got to do. Anyways, so after junior nats, which is when I qualified for junior worlds, that's where I benched 386 that prep. I got hurt pretty soon after returning to training. I think 2 weeks into, I had to take my NCLEX, which was like an exam that I had to pass for, to get my registered nurse license. So I took like 2 weeks off of training to focus on that, and then like literally like week 1 into training, I popped my hip. Like my hip just like kind of exploded. We're not going to get into that, but I had a lot more free time, opened up when I couldn't squat or deadlift for a little bit. And so I wanted to, for the 2 weeks that I was, 2-3 weeks that I was studying for my NCLEX, I was just kind of doing bodybuilding workouts because I needed to get in and out of the gym faster. But obviously I had junior worlds on the horizon, so I had to be still training hard. So I just was, doing like, a bunch of like random bullshit, honestly. Which, gave me the idea where I really started to kind of build the basis of what of a model that I'll talk about, which I've fully fleshed out at this point. But this was like the start of like really defining a model that I use within my system, and then really defining what I can really describe as my system these days. And so that comprised of me just pushing the bench specific as well as the non-specific hypertrophy workload of bench ridiculously hard. I think ultimately it just stemmed from like looking in the mirror and being like, does this look like a guy? Do I look like a guy who benches 405? And the answer was kind of no, just no. Like I wanted to bench 405. I wanted to bench above 400 pounds. And like looking at my like estimated total, it was going to be what was necessary to beat the guys, like Nathaniel Messiah, like Brandon Jones, that I was competing against in Malta that year. And so I swapped out a bunch of comp volume for like RP, basically 9 to 10 incline sets on my primary. My secondary, instead of doing any sort of comp back downs, I would take 2 singles, and then do a 3x5 on like genuinely like RP like 8.5 to 10. And this was every single week I would do this. There was no like build up. It was just a constant program. So I bench 4 days a week, my secondary and primary, and I've benched 4 days a week since I was like 17. I'm actually benching 3 days a week now, but maybe we'll get into that later. And so in my primary and secondary day, my tertiary and quaternary is what I meant to say, were basically just kind of technique practice. Quaternary was especially just technique practice. I would say like a constant like RP 6 to 6.5, of just like some 4s. And then my tertiary would be like RP 8 triples. So like pretty damn high intensity still for that tertiary. And every bench day had a single. RP 7.5 to 9 on the primary and secondary days, and then RP 6.5 on the tertiary and quaternaries. And obviously, this is really unusual programming. I also did 3 push days a week. I would do a 3rd push day on my tertiary, so I would have chest and tricep accessories specifically is what I'm like talking about there. Like relevant to powerlifting on primary, tertiary, and quaternary, or primary, tertiary, and secondary. So this is all just to illustrate what I was doing. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on like the and waste time really describing everything. But basically I was pulling out all the stops. I knew that I was going to eat like, 4,000 calories a day. I was going to eat a ridiculous amount, that I was going to, I didn't have squat and deadlift interfering. And I knew that I had been comp benching for a long time. I know how to comp bench. And ultimately, I don't, what I identified is that I don't need like comp bench like comp bench doesn't really like do anything for me. It doesn't really provide like a hypertrophy stimulus, and all I need personally was, just some practice to keep me refined on my tertiary and quaternary. So what I specifically identified is that like what is going to be most valuable for me to have on my primary and secondary day. And that's going to be to take advantage of me feeling good on those days and really pushing what is a stronger stimulus for hypertrophy, which is going to be that close grip and that incline work. So doing, that volume was deemed as far more valuable for a hypertrophy stimulus, which is what I wanted to get a bench specific, hypertrophy stimulus. And the reason that is, right, why, to illustrate it, it might be pretty intuitive for most, but just to illustrate it, right, we're going through significantly more levels of shoulder extension and elbow flexion, which is putting, more, you're training, the triceps, chest, delts, etc., all through like greater length and, greater emphasis is on a comp bench, which is, at least for me, I will say it, like wide grip high arch benching is cheating. It just is, like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It doesn't feel like, when I do a competition bench press, it doesn't feel like I'm doing an actual bench press. I'll still do it because I want to bench as much as possible, but it's not like, you do a high arch wide grip bench and it it was pretty just it was at that point an intuitive sense of this close grip and incline is more valuable for hypertrophy for me, because I'm, I, I feel my pecs and triceps are working harder when I do them. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then I knew that obviously I can't just do that for all four bench days. There's diminishing returns. So I still did, lighter comp work on my tertiary, my quaternary. So then I could be in prime condition to hit the singles that I had prior to my incline and my close grip work on my primary and secondary day. And so I wanted to like illustrate all that. If you have any, like, if I've talked for a while, if you have any questions or anything you want to say, let me know.
Oh no, it's been great so far. Like I have a lot of kind of topic ideas based off that. But I will say I really like how you weren't making progress in your bench, and I can see like it's very logical where like I can follow along. You're like, okay, doing a lot of comp bench, like this doesn't seem to be working for me. I don't look like a 405 bencher. I'm doing a ton of technique work, heavy work. Clearly, I'm not getting like more technical adaptations, more neurological gains, because otherwise like my bench would be going up. So it seems like maybe I should put some more eggs in like the basket of hypertrophy. But then I like how you implemented it too, where you had a lot of singles, so you're not losing the the technique and confidence and just being good at going heavy. But then the rest of your training was very polarized in the hypertrophy approach, because like at a certain point, obviously like the best power lifter Aidan is going to be really jacked, but like the best bodybuilder Aidan would be even more jacked. Like maybe not to some ridiculous level, but like if you just take out all of your singles, or you have to have some obviously to be good power lifter, but like you have to find the line basically as a power lifter of how much of my training should I dedicate towards actually being proficient at the lift and going heavy versus like when does that just start to take away from my long-term potential. Do you see what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I think finding that like equilibrium is pretty crucial when the window of what you respond to and what you can handle starts to get smaller and smaller, right? I think that's an analogy. I'm going to talk very shortly on this because I don't want to diverge from like my main talking point, but I think an incredible realization, and this is going to be super simple, but is actually pretty key, is everyone talks about how like as you like get more experienced powerlifting, the window of what you can respond to like shrinks. But with that also comes the room. It's like, it's not just the window of what you respond to, but the room for error also decreases as well. And that's something very important to keep in mind, to make sure that either you don't, have some very negative consequences happen with your own training or your own athletes.
Yeah,
So I think that's just a little piece of advice for the audience.
Yeah, I totally agree. I talk about that window all the time, in both ways too. Even just like how your sleep impacts your training. Like if you're brand new to training, you fall in the same program and you get a bad night of sleep, like you really might not notice the difference, even if there is one. But like once you get more advanced and your eating is bad and your sleep is bad, like it's much more noticeable.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Everything becomes more punishing.
Oh yeah, that's the right word.
Yeah.
I know much about that, Mr. Injury himself.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat right now. I was like, moderately fatigued, and even that led to some catastrophe recently. But we digress. Well, as far as and I want to give a little bit more context about how much like volume and intensity I'm giving myself. Right, I've been doing this for a while and had built up a pretty ridiculous bench and upper body work capacity by then. So I was already doing like what probably most would consider quite a lot before even changing to what I just described as my programming. So obviously, if I were to, identify that someone was in the same boat and needed something similar, I would scale that down to, what their appropriate workload is. I want to make sure that's like understood and that's a given. This isn't just something that I'm like dishing out to everyone. um, and then also, you have to understand that, that level of workload where I'm going RP, 9 to 10 on bench, 6 weeks in a row is because like I basically view junior worlds as like, yeah, my life is on the line. So that was a level of locked in that I'm not sure that will ever be achieved ever again. But but how I use this to define my model is really because I was able to flesh out. I mean, these are not new concepts. These are concepts inspired by, like the 6 years of experience and knowledge and research and, other sources that I've pulled from throughout the years. And other people have talked about this. These aren't, new concepts, but I think I've, organized them in a way that, will be valuable to, tell you all, which is like what and I've made a post about this somewhat recently, maybe a few months ago. But it's what I call like the 3 baskets model, which is basically that like we can view specific strength, that is. So and to like, define that would be like, how much you can lift on a specific movement, right? So not just like, how strong someone is like in generally, but like when we're talking about specificity itself, we can view strength as an equation of like technique plus like skill. So kind of proficiency, you can think about it as, because when I describe this, some people will think like tech and skill is the same thing, but there's a little nuance difference. And then hypertrophy. So we can view strength as an equation. Strength equals technique plus skill plus hypertrophy. And through my own experiences as well as my athletes throughout the years, I've been able to build this and then use this as a kind of like lens for how to balance someone's workload and specifically understand what kind of contents make up that workload. And then that fits within my system, which I'll describe my system a bit, but specifically to define what like, technique, hypertrophy, and skill means. I think the best way to I'll define them shortly, and then I think the best way to really I have a interesting way of illustrating my point. All right. So technique is just how how efficient someone's technique is, right? So this can include right how good they are at their peak technique and what their technique looks like in comparison to what you understand as like a base form of said like lift. So if we think of a base form of a squat, right? We have just like a standard like high bar squat. So a component of technique can be that they're a low bar squatter, then their stance, and then how much they turn their feet out. Do they bias into extension or flexion? What are they cueing with their back, etc. On a deadlift, it's pretty obvious. A base form of lift would be a conventional deadlift, and then modifications, improvements to technique could be seen as either just getting more proficient with that conventional or doing sumo or wider stance, just whatever it is. Technique is just what optimizations can that lifter make to their technique alone, and then get more refined at their optimal technique. Skill might be on a surface might sound like it's similar technique, but skill is just the proficiency at which you lift. So it's more so has to do with your workload on programming. How much can you do of the specific or specific enough movements that contribute towards just building like motor efficiency, neurological adaptations for that lift, being able to utilize the strength you have to your fullest degree, basically. Right. And this, you can think of skill as the concept of you do more of something, the more you do of something, the better you get at it. And then lastly, hypertrophy is pretty straightforward. It is just, how large the muscles are that are relevant towards that movement, how powerful you can get them, how you can build and lastly, I want to bridge them all three of them are connected as well. All three of these baskets will all have overlap to each other, right? So and let me illustrate that a little bit, right? The more proficient, the more skillful you are at a movement, the more effective it likely is for hypertrophy. The more hypertrophy you have, the easier it is to hold up your technical integrity. So your hypertrophy then positively impacts your technique. Good technique will make you more stable, more reliable, which will improve your skill because each set you do is now higher quality practice. See, all these things interlap with each other, and it's really about like understanding and defining like what areas are lacking with an athlete and what is needed to then drive that forward. And then you can also zoom out and understand you can place emphasis on different parts of this model throughout the year as well. Was taking off seasons, and then obviously during more specific periods of time you're turning the dial towards specificity in proximity to competition. But all three of these components absolutely need to be present at all times in order to get stronger on a movement. See if you have any.
Yeah, I think we see that super similarly. I know what posts you're talking about, and I think kind of like, I mean, I'm not trying to like steal your talking points, but I think like if you think about it like that, then how you should set up your programs like kind of is derived from that concept. That kind of makes more sense. It's kind of like would that be like I guess I don't want to say a top-down approach because I also use a very bottom-up approach in my coaching, but like just the concept on paper, like creating your own system is like coming from that. How much should we focus on this? And obviously it depends a little bit athlete to athlete, but it makes a lot of sense instead of just like, I think sometimes it's a mistake that coaches just like throw stuff down on paper because it sounds good. And then it's like, well, you're training your accessories super sub max, and that's not really beneficial at all. And if you looked at it from like your perspective, you could see that.
Yeah. And I think it's, I think it's, you want to start bottom up for sure. And give yourself room to fill these baskets. Right. So if you're like starting with a new athlete, you'd build an idea, through like asking them questions, through intake, you'd build an idea of what they need for each of these 3 baskets, then maybe be a little bit more conservative, be on the conservative end, and then be able to, fill those baskets as per their response dictates, which kind of gets me, which will kind of get me into my, what I've called my system. It's got a bit of a silly name, but maybe I need to work on it before I make some sort of public post about it. But I like it. It's a little silly though, and I call it like the Rage Strength Investigative Model or investigative system. And so this is how I use that model that I have. And let me say that, like, even though I call them my models, they're models that I've defined and been able to flesh out, describe, and use. But they're built on the accumulation of knowledge that I've gained from all the sources. So it's like I'm talking about this, but I stand on like the shoulder of giants. You know what I mean? So just want that said before people are if anyone's like you didn't come up with this. Which is okay. I didn't come up with this, but it's an inspired work. And that is simply just how I dictate like what the actual contents of the programming are going to be based off my understanding of their, basket needs, so to speak. And that will just be asking questions that relate to, what are relevant questions to ask to actually get an answer from the athlete, that will illustrate what their needs are. So I'll ask questions like, and this is assuming like, someone, let's say I'm 2 blocks in with an athlete, and we've we built an idea of what direction to go in the first block, and now we're in the second block, and let's say that their squat doesn't it went poorly. We'll just put it at that. And my athletes in my messages, and they're like, man, I felt so shitty today. Had such a awful, because that's what an athlete will say. They're not going to be nice. Unfortunately, they view you as a robot, so they're not going to be nice to you. At this point, you haven't worked with them for long enough yet, so they don't actually see you as a person yet. And so they're not going to be nice to you. They think they think your programming's not working, but ultimately, and you haven't worked with them long enough to convey to them that there's context, and these things will happen in powerlifting. But now it's your job to figure out what the hell is wrong with their programming. So that's where you start asking them questions to actually be able to get the information from them, because you can't do anything with I feel like shit that they're telling you. Because you'd probably interpret I feel like shit as like, they're really fatigued, but, a lot of times, that's, it might be fatigue, but a lot of times athletes don't actually know what fatigue is until you actually ask them more specific questions. So that's why you need to ask them questions, because they're not going to give you very good descriptors. You actually have to investigate and dig deep with a lot of athletes to understand, is it fatigue? Is it not enough, whatever. And so I'll ask questions like, how did the bar feel on your back? Did it feel light or heavy? And I'll just go over a few questions here, and then I'll go into what my interpretation of it would mean. And so they tell me the bar feels heavy, right? Which could be a sign of both fatigue or detraining. Bar feeling heavy could be both, but it's good to just know, did the bar feel light or heavy? Said it felt heavy. Ask them, do your legs kind of feel like they're explosive? Do you feel like you're producing a lot of force? Do you feel like the movement's very natural to you? Or do you feel like, you just get into the hole and you feel like you really have to force and grind your way through reps? It feels like you really have to force your way up. You're not, and then I'll also just flat. A lot of athletes will not be able to answer this question, by the way. But some really do have a very in tune feeling with, how like full their musculature is. So I will ask, like, does your musculature feel full? Like, do you feel like jacked, or do you feel like your musculature is flat? A lot of people just don't know. But that is a good insight, is, how like full does their musculature feel? Right. And so if they answer, no, my musculature feels really flat, and I feel like I'm really having to force my way through reps. I really, don't feel explosive. And then, I'll go, did you feel any sort of fatigue? And then I'll describe what fatigue is before just, letting that question be. I'll ask them, did you feel achiness in your erectors? Did you feel achiness in your glutes, quads? Did you feel, lethargic throughout your day? Did you feel low energy? And then lastly, of course, I'll ask them, what has their sleep, nutrition, just recovery variables look like for the past few days? Anything, extremely stressful happen in your life? Fill me in on that. And they say, no, nothing stressful happened. Life's been good, been getting great recovery. So and then they'll be like, I'm really surprised that I had a bad day because of this, like, what's up? And that's how, if you take away all that, that's how you know that, right on the, then, you can ask them how your technique felt as well. Right. So we're trying to hit all three baskets here, in terms of like, in the reason why I call this the investigative model is because I'm investigating questions specifically related to the three baskets model to then understand what direction to take training forward. And then I'm dictating, what the actual, changes I'm going to make to the programming will be, to appropriately address, whatever their three basket model needs are. And right. So the athlete, the bar feels heavy on their back. They're not lethargic. They're not fatigued. They're not achy. They, feel kind of flat in the musculature. Their technique feels a little bit off. So clearly this shows that they're detrained. They don't have high enough workload. This is what the interpretation we're making. And specifically, right, their musculature feels flat. So likely they need to have increases in their, lower body specific, lower body sets that are significantly difficult enough to, contribute towards hypertrophy. That was a really nerdy way of saying that they just need more sets of accessories or more intense. I would search for intensity first if there's room to increase intensity and then add sets. A little tidbit, this also goes for specific work as well. That's a tendency that I go for. And the bar is heavy on their back, which indicates that there's likely a intensity gap that needs to be filled. It might not be a big one. Might not be a big one, but either that's, and this doesn't just mean that, like, their secondary day now needs a primer single. But that, it's just a tool, but it might mean that the sets on the secondary need to be a little bit more significant, need to have their intensity increased. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need like a heavy exposure, but it does mean need it does mean that the workload that you have on specificity needs to be more significant. And then and then lastly, their technique felt really foreign and weird. So you can take a look at their technique itself. Is their movement like biomechanically appropriate? Do they look efficient? Is there anything that you can talk about? No, then likely their technique's fine. Let's say their technique's fine. No, then likely just as a result of making their workload more significant on their specific work, their technique is just going to improve as they reach like a level of workload that is adequately stimulating them, and then they're becoming more comfortable with the movement. Higher skill levels will improve your technique. So that's
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's and I'm not gonna, obviously there are just tons of different routes that this can go down, but I wanted to like really describe that process so someone can like take that and then understand if something goes wrong with their athletes, that they can, or themselves if they're self-coaching, and they can ask their athletes those questions, ask themselves those questions, and understand that obviously you're going to need to ask different questions and you're going to need to make different interpretations if based on what the athlete's telling you.
Yeah, I go through a very similar path with like very similar questions, like bar heavy on your back, how sore you felt, how technique felt, are you explosive, etc.
Yeah,
I think that's really interesting to hear because, I mean, granted, we've consumed a ton of similar content. I'm sure we both started in powerlifting like a similar time, probably looked up to similar people and whatnot. But I think we both kind of like came to that very similar like thought process on our own, and somewhat through just like through coaching as well, just like experience with coaching and figuring out like what the case kind of tends to be, or even as an athlete, like noticing yourself like, bar feels heavy on my back today, but like my knees and my quads and my glutes are like destroyed and I felt great last week and like workload didn't change. I think maybe like I'm a little bit fatigued, and you pull back and it goes well. You're like, like I'm onto something now, but I think that's really interesting because like I have a near identical thing where I'm asking athletes like those same questions, and half the time they're probably like, this guy's a broken record. Like he asks me the same questions all the time,
Yeah, I think a lot of athletes are weirdly caught off guard when you start to try and do your job, and like that you have a bad day and they expect an instant answer and then get, like 3-minute voice message of you asking questions. And, but, I think, well, I think if you are in this space for long enough, it is, definitely like you should come to these conclusions. You should build this very similar model, notice these very similar things. And I think the coaches who aren't, either just like don't care about it enough, or, or aren't going to take the time to send a 3-minute voice message and, explain, like, ask these questions and explain, what each specific question even means, because a lot of the athletes aren't going to know. And I'm not trying to just like shit on coaches, but like, there are definitely some out there that I absolutely know would not take the time to do that. Because they treat this as like a, side hustle than it is like an actual passion,
Yeah, for sure. I also like appreciate those kind of things because I feel like you're saying, like if you're in this long enough and you really care and pay attention, you'll come to very similar conclusions. But like I've noticed a lot of those things lately, just listening to different coaches, just different athletes, even like YouTube videos, like, oh, my training, I've noticed this, just like some weird technique thing that like goes against the grain. And I'm just like, I appreciate that because someone would only know this if they've just been like grinding in powerlifting. And it's just like their life for like 10 years, because this is a thing like not a ton of people know. You have to just like, it makes me feel very like I relate to them a lot. Because I'm like, you have to be in the trenches to know this stuff.
It's like a mutual respect, or it's like a respect thing that like you know someone's really about this if they're talking about this or noticing it and picking it up.
Yeah, exactly. Mutual respect.
And like and the reason why I say like the mutual respect is because I've experienced that with people who maybe I don't really like their personalities, but then like they say something like that, I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? Like I have like, a level of like respect for that, even if, I don't think I'd be your friend.
Yeah, totally. No, I know exactly what you mean too. I also feel like a lot of people are portrayed differently online, and then you actually talk to them, and like every person I've done like 13 podcasts now, every single person I've talked to, even if it's like off air, is like super, super nice to me. Even if they're like slightly like a weird persona online, or like a weird DMer, like you're like face to face and they're super cool.
Yeah. I've had the opposite experiences too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where like people are weird online and then like facetiously nice in person.
Oh, okay.
Or just like, where just like I've experienced some fakeness for sure.
I get what you mean for sure. I did want to ask though, real quick.
Like I had a guy who like unfollowed me, and then I saw him in person. He's like, "Yo, what's up, Aidan?" And I'm like, "Hey."
Yeah, dude, actually, I can't lie. Whenever I started posting a lot of coaching content originally, I definitely lost like some people that I was like close friends with at the gym that I would see like multiple times a week and talk to every time, like genuinely close friends. Like would see them sometimes outside the gym, and they've unfollowed me after my first coaching post.
Dude,
I had
what? That's crazy.
Yeah, I had like 100 followers at the time, so it dropped to like 90, and I was like, "Bro, what?" And I noticed it, and I like scrolled through, and I was like, "This is crazy." And then like, yeah, I don't know, it was crazy, but sometimes the people that you would not expect.
I think my experience with powerlifting has gotten significantly better over the past. I'd say I've been doing this for like 6 months now. I like left a bunch of group chats that I was like random Instagram group chats that I was in. I have mostly disengaged from like social media other than my close friends and my own like business. And I think my experience with powerlifting has become significantly better when the only things with powerlifting that I'm focused on are like myself, my coaching, and my like local community at my own gym.
Yeah,
And so like I can get like my fill of like socializing with the powerlifting community by like talking to people at my own gym and making friends there. So I don't have to go on like Instagram and talk with people and like group chats online and then really be in the know about like everything that's happening in powerlifting or like, who's hitting what. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to do is like kind of detach themselves from the online sphere and focus on their own lives.
no, for sure. Especially as like powerlifters, where powerlifting is so like Instagram heavy. Like everyone posts their training, everyone talks about it, and like coaches are obviously like just on Instagram more seeing their own athletes stuff, or like you're just on your phone a lot coaching in general. So it's really easy to get like sucked into stuff, and then just with like internet culture, like I like see like a post and I'm always like, oh, let me go check what the comments are. It's like I assume they're gonna be negative and I want to read them for some reason. And then I just read it and it's like negative. And lately I'm like, like I gotta
Exactly.
that's such a self-imposed negative on my life for no reason.
Yeah, it is stuff like that. It is small moments like that. And that's the kind of thing that I've been trying to disconnect from. And obviously I'm forced to be on social media pretty heavily. But I think and I have closer friend group chats that are on social media, so I'm on it often, like talking with them. But other than that, a disconnect is pretty good. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, so I guess we can get back to. I had one more question about like the original like 386 to 405 bench period. So you like bumped up a lot of bodybuilding work, especially like the RPEs on it. I wanted to see how did you feel when that was happening? Like, were you like you were taking yourself through like your system, like how things felt in your hands, how sore you were, that kind of stuff? Can you describe how you felt going through that transition period, like the day you benched 405, if you can remember?
Oh, I can remember for sure. So I made the decision to give myself that workload. And my immediate anticipation was like, I'm going to give myself like an entire month where I expect that I'm going to feel like shit basically every session. Because I knew it was going to like feel pretty crushing to do. I knew it could handle it. It wasn't like an insane, it sounds, crazy, but it wasn't like it wasn't something that I felt like I couldn't handle, and so I told myself, all right, I'll give myself like a while where I know I'm just going to be under fatigue, but I ultimately trust in my body's ability to then adapt and build my work capacity to be able to handle this. So that's what I was betting on. I was betting on my work capacity improving by giving myself this. Which I want to talk just a quick moment, like the 3 baskets, model. Obviously, you can't just pour into those baskets into infinity. The top of each of those baskets is going to be fatigue. So you have to do everything within the confines of, not building excessive fatigue. I just want that's like my now the 3 models is a complete idea that has been wrapped up, and now I can stop talking about it. And so I knew it would induce fatigue, but I was betting on just giving myself that, and that improving my capacity by giving myself so much. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. Like through the first 4 weeks, I was just kind of like pretty damn achy on basically every bench day, but every bench day, I was rapidly, I will say, in progressing on incline. I went from like 220. I started at 225 for 6, and by like week 5, I hit 245 for 9. Oh, and of course I was in a surplus, but what I will say is, despite only progressing from 380 to 386, I had gone up an entire weight class during that time. So,
huge difference for sure.
But yeah, the program was the only difference. I went from like 190 to like 200, and I only put 6 pounds on my bench.
Mm-hmm.
So and the weight gain from actually, I lost weight, but that maybe was just my like lower body like atrophying. I don't know, just from the hip injury. So that totally could have been it. But I actually was sub 200 pounds when I benched 405. So
that's kind of sick.
yeah, it was pretty sick. Yeah, it's sick as someone who has like long arms, and like just being honest with myself, genetically, like like my lower body is just way better than my upper body.
Know your wingspan?
It's only +2, so it's not like I'm at like a huge disadvantage. Like my ape index is +2.
That's really weird because I have a shorter range of motion on bench for sure than you, but I think we're like, are you like 5'8"?
Yeah,
but I have a +3 ape index. So you definitely are like a way more leveraged puller than me. But I don't know, maybe like my shoulders are wider or something in my rib cage or something. I don't know. Because people always like, dude, you must have like short arms. You like don't have a huge bench range of motion. Like I have a +3 ape index somehow.
There's some other factors there. I mean, I do think the biggest factor is that like it just obviously like it took me 3 push days a week to look jacked, and all at RP10 with insane amounts of volume. So obviously, my upper body really needed something special in order to look like every other powerlifter who's been training for 7 years.
Oh yeah, totally. I wasn't trying to like disagree or discredit you. I was just saying
Yeah.
like it's funny because you objectively have more range of motion on bench than me, like easily, and less on deadlift. But like we like on paper, it looks funny.
Yeah. It does. It does. It was more so just for anyone like watching, like just to like let them know that leverages aren't the end all be all.
Yeah, for sure.
I have like what you'd objectively consider bad squat leverages, and I'd say squat is like possibly the nicest looking lift of mine out of the 3.
Yeah, I agree. But you also have some huge legs, so there's your muscle mass making up for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I can like really trust my legs as well, so I can embrace a little bit of squatty, like more of a squatty pattern, despite like a short torso.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, that's besides the point. Around week 5, I noticed exactly what I expected, an increase in work capacity where I was doing more work. I was progressing. So my workload was actively increasing as I was getting stronger. And I think it was like week 5 when I like ended up hitting like I think I started the block with like 330 for a triple, and that was like day 1 of it, and I ended up hitting like 363 for like I had like 353 for a single at like 8 on week 4 or 5, and then hit 363 for a single at 8 the next week after that for a single at 5 to 6. Or no, single on week 5 to 6. Sorry, I'm getting like my information jumbled here. And that was when I knew. I was like, dude, I might bench 400 next week. Because I just saw like, a +5 increase in my bench, +5 kilo increase in my bench in 1 week. And my incline bench has gone. Oh, and also like my close grip went from like 308 for 5 to 325 for 5 at like the same RP within like 4 or 5 weeks. And it was the week I hit 363 for a single at 8, and then later that week I had 325 for 5 close grip, and this was like at RP9, and then I hit 340. I hit 359 for a triple on my tertiary, and then and then it was the Wednesday primary that I then benched 402.
Yeah, and
So
then you did a couple weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks of 400 plus in a row, right?
yeah, then I did 405 a week after that, and then I hit 402 with a pause after that.
But that was just the time of your life. You're like, I did it.
Yeah, dude, I was like that was the time of my life, man. That was peak powerlifting experience. So it pretty much played out exactly as I expected. I was more fatigued. I just felt fatigue through week 1 to week 4. Then my work capacity increased, so I started feeling less fatigued despite pushing really hard. I felt achy like pretty much all the time, but fatigue was at a threshold where like I could progress within. So it wasn't like fatigue wasn't a limiting factor. It was just present. And that was a key, right? I was fatigued, but not enough that it was affecting my ability to perform and progress. So that's the kind of like healthy fatigue that can exist within powerlifting. But if you're in something, this will be a little bit of a warning / advice. If you are experiencing like constant levels of fatigue and constant levels of achiness, but progressing, getting really strong, that is likely a sign that you should only do this for a short period of time and look to decrease workload in the future so that you can progress without that fatigue and achiness. But it is good. Pushing yourself to that level is good for short periods where you need to make a whole lot of progress.
Yeah, I agree. I was doing something similar on my deadlift recently. Maybe not that crazy, but not like a bench. But I was pushing it really hard, and I was just like, I can't even remember exactly. Maybe for like a month, like my conventional, and I was pushing the RPs super hard too. And I was doing conventional and RDLs and stuff, and I was hitting like 3-4 AMRAPs a week, and like just making crazy progress. I was even in a deficit for a little bit, and I was like, dude, this is insane. I want to make progress forever. And then I just like kind of hit a wall where I was like, okay, I'm starting to feel like absolutely cooked.
My you body just get strong enough that like stimulus like starts to shift.
Yeah. And then I just had to pull back and back to PRs, but the program looked very differently. I did want to ask, so applying, I know not every single athlete you're going to program, especially like their bench, the same way that you do yours, but do you find like some athletes they just like, even if they all have good technique, if you focus their training more on hypertrophy, some athletes are just more responsive to it. And like some athletes do better, they get a better response from more heavy work.
I think I'll have a two-part answer to this. And that is, I think that ultimately, like, that just brings me back to like my model and understanding like what is the dose of hypertrophy that they need in order to like create the stimulus we're looking for, but won't be too much that we're reaching. If someone is really beat up from the amount of hypertrophy work you give them, I mean, that's just a sign that they don't need that much, right? That's a sign that you're reaching like diminishing returns. So, this isn't a message to go out and kill your lifters, right? This is a message just to make sure that you're actually putting an emphasis on that. You're not just giving them like a, optional 3x10 to 12 at RP7 on chest press, which is like what some coaches do. And
an optional chest press or like quad or glute or anything accessory is crazy.
Yeah, I'm not even like, this isn't stuff I'm making up. I've taken on a lot of athletes over 7 years. That means every single one of them I've seen their programming before they've come to me, because I have athletes send me their programming so I can see what kind of workload they're under. So that's why I'm asking for their programs. And that means I've seen a lot of really bad programs. And these is the kind of stuff I see. And so for some athletes, that means that means that they need 2 sets of chest press on their primary, and it needs to stay at like a 2 RIR, and they absolutely cannot go beyond that. For some athletes, they need they might need 5 sets of dumbbell bench, and all of them need to be taken to failure. Right. So, but it's all about finding out what that range is for that athlete, and balancing it with their skill and technique needs. Right, make them as proficient as they can on their technique, so they can get the most out of their lift. And the skill component, right? Make sure that they're actually doing enough, their specificity, that they're they can use their strength, and that might look like needing an entire 5x5 with a primary single or secondary day. That might just mean that their secondary day is like 3 singles at like 60%. That is just like bare bones minimal practice. There's the spectrum is very broad. And then the second aspect of this is lifter psychology. I think sometimes, and there's many cases where you have to do this, but sometimes like you have to lean into lifter psychology, and you have to lean into like how much time they can be in the gym as well. So oftentimes, there's athletes who just want to powerlift. They don't want to do accessories. They don't like accessories. It's something that is a chore to them. So oftentimes these are the athletes where I'll give them like close grip instead of chest press. I'll give them like, I don't know, like an already, I give a lot of people RDLs, but I'll definitely give them like an RDL instead of like a stiff leg deadlift is what I typically go with, rather than like hypers or hamstring curls in the day. Right. So I can actually like integrate their volume into their like main lifts rather than, bogging them down, accessories are not bogging me down. I love accessories, or most of my athletes love doing their accessories, but there's definitely gonna be athletes that will not want to do it at all, and so you're gonna have to find strategies to more effectively have them do their accessories. And I think I just remembered there was an analogy I wanted to make for the 3 baskets model that I think would be really interesting interesting to say, but I also want you to hear it, which is like, all right, if we take up the importance, and this is to highlight the importance of hypertrophy as well. And I should have said this earlier, honestly, so I really could have highlighted the importance of hypertrophy, but I'll say it now. And that is, so I deadlift 770, right? And this is, I'm not just saying this to say this, but I know that if I take like 2 weeks off, I've taken like 3 months off deadlifting at a certain point, and then randomly walked into the gym and I just wanted to test my max. And so I got 670. It was like RP 10. So I know that the skill component, right? So just doing specific workload makes up about 100 pounds of my deadlift. So skill makes up around 100 pounds. Technique, I know that when I switch from sumo to conventional, my conventional is about 110 pounds weaker. So my technique makes up 110 pounds of my 770 deadlift. And what remains is all hypertrophy. It is all the gains that I've made over the course of the year. So that leaves me with around a 585 conventional or 570-ish conventional. And that is, and I've also randomly tested a conventional, and that's around what I'll be at if if I'm completely untrained on conventional, and it's solely just a random like conventional max out, which I've happened to do. I did it during my hypertrophy phase because I was just bored, and I did like 585 on a deadlift bar. So I imagine that's probably like 570 on a stiff bar. 15 pounds is usually the difference that a deadlift bar makes for me. It doesn't make a lot of a difference for me. And so that shows that a vast majority of your, strength gains are going to come from hypertrophy. That's just kind of like an illustration. And I had an athlete who was like an accessory denier. They genuinely didn't understand why accessories were important. And so when I illustrated that to them, they're like, holy shit, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, I've got a similar experience with like squat. I was like letting my quad recover, but my squat was like probably around like 650 at the time. Mm-hmm. And I took like maybe 2 months just completely off squatting. I think I was only doing leg extensions. Like that was literally it. And so I had like no squat pattern at all. And I came back and like day one, I was like, I could probably squat like 550. And then like 4 sessions later, I was like, I'm back at 650 with like not a ton of specificity or anything. So I do think at a certain point, like once you've gotten the technique and the skill down after years and years and years, it comes back very fast. And do you think like that strategy, the like polarized approach like you're doing for your bench, like more frequent heavy singles and then like a ton of hypertrophy work on top of that with accessories, do you think that's a strategy that seems to be more effective for higher level lifters who already have higher skill and better technique and really need to focus more on the hypertrophy, or do you find it's pretty evenly mixed?
I think what I have, seen happen for a lot of people, not everyone, but this happens for a lot of people, is that, and this goes for all three lifts. Usually happens on squat and deadlift first, and then happens on bench, and that's what happened for me. But it can happen in any sort of order. I've seen it happen in like all orders, where usually squat and deadlift usually go together and bench goes there. But so sometimes it'll happen on bench first and then squat and deadlift later, vice versa. Is that people need a high workload both on like squat and deadlift and with their hypertrophy, in order to break through a certain strength threshold. And whatever that threshold is, that can be anything, and it depends on the lifter, and it depends on how much experience the lifter has. And almost like a light switch, and it happens incredibly fast. Like, this sounds crazy, and I'm sure you've probably experienced it. You've probably experienced it yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
And like a light switch, your work, like what feels like your work capacity, but it isn't really your work capacity. It's just that you've gotten strong enough that now this work is so stimulating, is that like almost like a light switch, you cannot handle that amount in the slightest. And your work capacity demands, both in terms of skill and, less so hypertrophy, but mostly specific work, just like plummets. Like you just can't do nearly as much as you can anymore. And it is blessing and a curse in disguise. And I take it as almost like, all right, you've been doing this for long enough. Like, you don't need all this anymore. You've gotten strong enough. And, what I notice is that like pacing becomes way more important. Like, you don't need like, frequency might drop. You might need frequency drops. You might need your back downs need to become incredibly submax. And I just see it happen I see it happen genuinely all the time. Like, people, like, there's typical strength levels that I'll see this happen at, typical, like, you've been doing this for so long, 5 years or so. And, that happened for bench on me recently. So I don't do all that anymore. I dropped to 3x a week benching, and I dropped from 3 push days to 2 push days, and my bench started thriving. Even though I'd done that in the past, that's not what I need now. And that happened on squat and deadlift probably a year and a half before it happened on bench, where I don't do, despite being like 100 pounds stronger in my deadlift, and despite being like 100 pounds stronger in my squat, my secondary day on squat and deadlift is probably equivalent to what I did as like an 18-year-old in terms of like strength level. In terms of volume, I was doing way more volume, but you'll just know this happens with a lot of people, right? You'll just notice a massive shift in massive downward shift in their ability to handle training. And you really need to, when that happens, do not fight it, lean into it.
Yeah, I've noticed that exact same thing. So it's very interesting that you have too. Like, basically how I got to like a mid-4s squat or like a mid-3s bench, just like bench more to bench more, squat more to squat more. Like, I just squat like every day, like pretty hard, like bunch of sets.
Dude, sometimes that's what it takes to break through those like levels. So it's honestly like, that's why I think it's a blessing, because you've been doing this for so long, and your body's like, it's almost like, you've earned getting this far. You don't need to work as hard anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think in those like phases, it's just, first of all, you're not that strong, so you're not going to be that fatigued. You're not doing that much damage with a 315 squat, compared to like a 700 squat. It just feels different. Not that I would know what a 700-pound squat, I guess, feels like. You've been pretty close, like 6 pounds off. So I guess.
Yeah. Well, I've had it on my back before.
Okay, fair. But anyway,
like, it didn't go up.
Sorry to hear that. It was in the gym, right?
Yeah, I just shouldn't have taken it out of the day.
You got to send me the video after this.
It was like, I just pushed my secondary a little too hard, like leading up to it, but then I felt good enough, and then I was just like, we'll get back there though.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. But basically, like you're just not getting that fatigued, and you're just really getting better skill and technique when you first start. 'Cause like I've never squatted before. You go on day one, like 135 has like shaky technique, and then your technique gets better, and suddenly like 225 is moving just as fast. Like a week later, you know. But then eventually, like uh, that just kind of runs out for the most part, and you're gonna make a lot better progress through. I mean, obviously, you got to always work on all of them, but you're going to make better progress through more hypertrophy focus. But I will say, like, it's kind of like if you start a new accessory right now, if you like change from a pec deck to a machine chest press, the first couple weeks of that machine chest press, even though like you've done a ton of similar stuff, you're just going to make much better progress than you would just from your skill and technique getting better. And then it like obviously runs out. And from there, progress is a little more difficult and programming has to be more fine tuned. But I think that's a pretty similar analogy.
Yeah. It's like a same thing, but on like a smaller scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Where
I have like
it's like really zoomed out, and it can be really jarring. It's a jarring experience for a lot of people. It's almost like you feel like you become like a grandpa.
no, for sure. I kept trying to like push that too. Like whenever that just stopped working, I just kept trying to push it for a while, and I was just like, dude, like this just always worked. I'll just do more and more, and just like nothing would happen. I just
Yeah,
feel like crap.
you get like mentally caught up thinking that you need to keep chasing higher highs in order to bring that out of you, but I think people get really mentally caught up with like the idea that like they're like what they consider like elite now, or like at least at their end range gains, and that they think that like, oh, like it's just like I'm in hard mode now, when in reality like hard mode was like getting through your intermediate stages, and then like now you're in easy mode. You're in easy mode, but you're just going to be making slower gains.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you have time for like one more question?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. I guess it's kind of like a part A and B. But with all of this being said, what are your favorite go-to like squat, bench, and deadlift accessories? And then part B of it would be like, how much emphasis do you place on like a stimulus to fatigue ratio type of thing when you're programming accessories? Is that something you look at, or do you think it's not as important?
So favorite accessories for deadlift. Deadlift is going to absolutely be like stiff leg deadlift and variations of a stiff leg deadlift. I like stiff leg deadlift over RDL because for like 90% of people, it's going to have a better SFR. So there you go. There's your answer to the second question. And also, it's just a pure hinge, right? You're getting into a deeper, more pure hinge than an RDL. So I think training more extreme versions of movements gives you like movement competency and like very strong confidence that in these like lesser extreme movements that your technique and like integrity is going to like hold up. And so with that in mind, and then just of course like other than stiff leg, I'll give like one answer, and then I'll give like a few other answers of just like stuff that I like to get in just hypertrophy sets, and then I'll be like hypers and hamstring curls. Those are like my other two go-tos. Dumbbell RDLs for people who like either dumbbell RDLs have a very like niche use for me, which is like people who get really fatigued after their squat or deadlift work, and then like they're usually strong enough that a dumbbell RDL wouldn't be effective because their dumbbells don't go heavy enough, but because they're like pre-fatigued from squatting and deadlifting, that they actually can, despite being like a 600-pound deadlifter, use like 100 pounds on dumbbell RDLs and actually achieve like close to failure, which is me. I deadlift 770, but and my PR on dumbbell RDL is like 200 pounds, in each hand for like a set of 10. But I can on any given day use like 110s and do like crank out a set of 12, and it'll be like 2 RER despite being 220 pounds per hand, like in total. I'll just be, a little cooked after my deadlift back down. So that becomes productive work for me. So that's a niche use for dumbbell RDLs. And the reason I programmed that is because, if someone, if stiff legs are too fatiguing for someone, right? If like that barbell hinge is too fatiguing for someone. For squat, belt squat, if they have if they're a proficient squatter and their and they are a proficient belt squatter as well, and they don't their belt squat doesn't look like garbage, right? And sometimes it takes a little while for that belt squat skill to build up, but I think there's nothing else that basically becomes squat specific volume like a belt squat, right? It basically, for a lot of people, belt squat will basically make up for back downs. Same with stiff legs. Stiff legs will basically, stiff legs can become someone's deadlift back downs. So those are movements that are typically going to have, and then hack squat. If someone's a bad belt squatter where they just don't have leverages that are very good for a proficient belt squat, then definitely hack squat, just because along the same line as a stiff leg, it is the most extreme version of a squat you can get, where you're just shoving the knees forward. So that is going to really help someone maintain their technical integrity, because they feel like they can just really load into their knees, and their quads are going to provide that that power, without a doubt, if you're really pushing hack squats. Other than that, I'd say for most people, honestly, the most useful leg accessory is just going to be leg press.
I love a good leg press, to be honest.
Yeah, I think most people the most productive way of training legs is just going to be having them sit down after they've already done hard squats, or not hard, but because most of the time we're not training a squat all that hard, but just doing a squat itself, even if it's at an RP6, is hard. You know what I mean? You have a lot of weight in your back, right?
Yeah,
you're tired. You're tired.
There's not any spinal loading too, which is nice for a hack squat sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. That's if you're strong, it can be a little taxing.
Yeah, there's such a difference the stronger you get, just how you feel after doing accessories. If you were to go do just one single on squat, then someone's like, all right, Aidan, go do 3 sets to failure on a hack squat, or go do it on a leg press. Afterwards, you're gonna my body feels a lot better on the leg press, as long as they're both decently set up. But I always walk away wow, my legs, my muscles are kind of beat up on a leg press. On a hack squat, my body just feels very destroyed in general.
Yeah. So something else I'll do is that because those compound heavy accessories are so fatiguing, if I'm looking at a athlete's training day, I'm I want them to have 3 sets of quads on this day. What I'll do is I might just give them a one top set of belt squat. They have one belt squat set of the day, and then do the other 2 sets of their quad extensions, and or let's say their primary deadlift. I want them to do, say, we have a top set, and then we have super submax back downs. If I'm going to give someone a stiff leg deadlift on their primary, they're going to have really easy back downs that are basically just technique practice. And then I'll maybe give them 2, but a lot of times I've been just giving them you just give them the 1 set of stiff legs that they can push, and then their other 2 sets are hamstring curls, because I was looking for 3 sets of hamstrings of the day. And that's a really easy way of making sure that those heavy movements don't become too much. And ultimately, these movements are often so stimulating that one is entirely enough, even if it doesn't feel like it would be, or if you have an idea of arbitrary amounts of volume that you need for you need your 3 sets, or else the first and second were useless.
No, yeah, totally. I do a similar thing, especially with the hamstring curls and leg extensions, especially lifters that get a lot of overlap in hip fatigue from a squat and a deadlift. and they're kind of like pulling from the same bucket. And then like on top of that, they can just handle more extra quad work. But, like same thing, like on like a bench, like who does purely benching is like, man, my triceps just got cooked and my front delts got cooked before my chest did, or like on a deadlift, like hamstrings. You can always kind of handle a little more hamstring curl or a little more like tricep work. And like for the lifter that is a very hip dominant squatter and deadlifter, there's that overlap. It seems to be the same thing with like quads that I've found.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, there's absolutely going to be like someone who, like probably someone newer and not, as strong, you can just give them like the 3x10 to 12 on like press, and they'll eat all the sets up. And, they probably won't even be that tired after.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely have like one athlete on my team that I'm thinking of right now. That's like one of my stronger athletes for sure, but like he just eats up workload like crazy, and I'm like, dude, like genuinely how? Like he like on his deadlift, he pulls conventional. He's got like hard RDLs on his primary, like a couple hard sets on his primary and a secondary. They're like all pretty hard, and like we just have to do that for him to progress. His deadlift is going up like so fast. Like every week, he's like, dude, I feel so much better than last week. And this is like what we found works. But I'm like, dude, you respond like almost nobody on my team. Like, I don't get how you're doing this.
Yeah, some of those guys, there absolutely is, guys like that. I think the person that I gave the most workload that I've ever worked with was a 120. That,
really?
Like deadlifted mid-7 and squatted mid-6.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is crazy. It had a learning curve to it at the time.
Yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
I've got one dude on my team right now too, and like his volumes are like I do very, very low volumes myself. That's what I make the best progress with, and like he's very similar or like even less. And I'm like, dude, this is crazy, because he came to me with a system where he was doing like just a shit ton of volume, like tons. And so I was like, all right, I guess like I suspect that you need a little bit less. You're probably a little overworked based on everything he was telling me. And like we started off doing that the first block and just like gradually kept tapering things down. And he's genuinely like a quarter of the volume he came to me doing. And he's like finally making a progress.
Yeah. Was there a process where like you just kept like dropping it and he just continued to like feel fried despite like continually making drops?
Yeah, exactly. Or like we'd make a drop and he'd be like, oh, I feel a little better for like a workout. And then he'd be like, oh, I'm just cooked again. And like he constantly had like knee, elbow, shoulder, pec, just like everything. When he came to me, it was just like killing him. And I was like, dude, like you're doing so much work as like a pretty strong bencher. He's like pretty much a bench only guy. He does like RDLs and some quad stuff on the side, because he benches like low 4s. And I was like, you're doing like a ridiculous amount. Like he was doing like some like pretty close to like 20 like basically AMRAPs a week, split up amongst like 2 days.
Dude,
so he
what?
goes not like complete AMRAPs, but like hard sets. You know what I mean? It's like 10 on each day, and a lot of it was on like a pin press and stuff too, which like is gonna beat up your body more. And like now his secondary day is like a pretty easy like 4x2, like very sub max. His primary day, he's got like 2 hard sets of bench and then like a machine chest press. And like
that sounds fun.
What was that?
This sounds fun, just doing like minimal amounts.
Yeah, he has like borderline like a secondary like speed day. He has like doubles with like 80%.
Yeah, I think it takes an experience like that or two, plus just being in the game for a while, to be more comfortable with making like really aggressive swings and basically being able to take someone from like those really high highs to like lows, and be like, all right, let's not like because I've absolutely been in the same situation where I've had athletes that like needed less, and then I've taken like what would be like a smart like step process down, and then have the exact same experience where like you just kept dropping and they still experience issues. And I think it takes time and experience to really be comfortable with like accepting that like I don't care if they detrain, I just don't want them feeling bad anymore.
Yeah, we got to that point for sure. Like the first block, I was like tapering things down, and like it went okay. The second block, I was like, dude, I feel like we just gotta like slash some workload here. because like your body is like not handling this. Obviously, he never got injured. Like his body finally feels good now. So it's like clearly the correct move, and he didn't even like train at any point. Like, and his bench is going so much better now. It's crazy, but like that's definitely something you have to get comfortable with, and I think that just comes with experience.
Yeah. All right. So bench accessories.
Yep.
And the number one is gonna be dumbbell bench. I think it's the movement that most often has acute carryover to benching, which makes sense. It's about the most like specific thing that you can get. And it's of course, then just utilizes this exact same musculature and trains it quite well. And for a lot of people, it's dumbbell bench is not very fatiguing either. For a lot of people, for some people, I'm sure it is, but most people can push dumbbell bench really hard and not feel very affected by it. So then that makes it effective for very movement specific hypertrophy. And also it has a level of, yes, it is like slightly unstable, but part of that like stability and motor control really carries over to some really nice like proprioception into their bench technique, I've found as well, where they just have a greater level of control over their own movement while doing comp bench as a result of doing double bench. Secondly, I just say chest press to like, basically, very similar movement pattern, but just more stable, less fatigue, can push it really hard. And then pec flies for hitting the shorten or the, I mean, it depends on how you do it, but like press for hitting shortened position, and then pec flies for kind of like what I found in particular for pec flies is that, this is athletes' experience as well, my own experience, but for specifically wider grip benchers, pec flies can be really good because they kind of feel a lot of times when you're in such amounts of like internal rotation and you're really like, bringing yourself into lots of like abduction, a lot of lifters can really feel like what they describe and I describe as well as exposed in that bottom positioning. And pec flies feel like they really build like a lot of like integrity in that bottom positioning where you feel a lot more like rock solid rather than like losing like some tension basically to make it like the simplest way possible. But and then lastly, I don't like them as much. I don't give them as much, and I don't like them as much anymore. And I don't think there's anything special about them. But there absolutely is. There absolutely are people who acutely benefit from them and see a unique response from them. It's going to be weighted dips. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, we got to say something.
No.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean with that like exposed feeling. I used to be like, when I was leaner, I used to touch higher and have a more flared position, and I'd touch like on my rib cage, and then I'd feel very exposed in the bottom. But I like sink, so it wasn't as bad. If I'd ever like experiment with a soft touch for sure. Then as I've just gotten like fatter, I just like touch lower and I sink into my stomach with more tucked style, so I don't feel that. But I know exactly what you're talking about for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'd have to honestly like experience it to know. But I have found that pec flies absolutely contribute to fixing that issue. A lot of times it's also a technical issue of like really dialing in like someone's like amount of like shoulder rotation that they have during their lift. Either likely they're not like stacking very well, but just the pec flies help with like what feels like structural integrity pretty much.
Yeah, no, I know just what you mean.
So and then just like a lot of tricep work. Smith machine jam press. That's a big one. That's like the go at tricep movements for me.
Dude, I've seen a lot of people like that one, but it always just destroys my elbows. I have very sensitive elbows.
Yeah, if it doesn't destroy your elbows, then just a standard straight bar push down.
Yeah, that's what I normally do. I have baby elbows for some reason. They hurt on like everything, and so I have to just like always. I have to be very careful with my elbows. All my other joints feel great. It's just my elbows.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I didn't get. I did not have a single elbow issue for like 6 out of 7 years of my I hesitated to say that because of 6-7, but
Oh,
6 out
no.
of 7, yeah, six out of 7 years of my powerlifting career, I never had a single elbow issue, and that has like plagued me for the past year. But part of that was because I experienced that very harsh turnaround from having a very high bench work capacity to now, kind of experiencing that effect that I did on squat and deadlift like a while
Uh-huh.
ago. Yeah. So, which I'm honestly thankful for, dude. I did not want to have to continue to do all that I was giving myself. I'm very happy that I only need to bench 3 times a week now. I only need to do 2 week push days now. I can train like a normal person for once.
No, I know what you mean. That's definitely fun. I'm down to like 2 now, and it's actually kind of nice. I like
Yeah.
training a lot, but like my gym's kind of far away, so I'm home more often. It's been a nice break.
That is partially what inspired me to chill as well. I didn't want to be in the gym for as many days a week. How far of a drive is it
I
for
mean,
you?
it's not too bad, but it's like 25 minutes both ways. So that basically adds like an hour to my gym experience, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That it's the same for me. That was enough to be like, I'd be like to have that time for something else.
Yeah, especially as like my roster's grown. I'm like, my wife, I'm just like working from home now. My wife is at work, and so like I try to go to the gym when she's there, and then I also have like coaching stuff to manage. So like, especially on like busier days, like on Sunday, I generally have more programming, and then, like trying to go to the gym like while she's at work, and then
Yeah.
also get all my programming stuff done. I like feel bad, and she comes home, and it's like spilling over by like 2 hours, and I'm like, sorry, we can't hang out tonight. I can't manage time well.
Yeah, dude, that's the type of stuff that like makes you lock in
Yeah.
when you realize that like, man, I have to like organize my time better so the missus isn't unhappy. Um, I'm curious, what days of the week do you make your like longest slash like most intense sessions?
My lifting sessions.
Yeah,
Let me think. It's like I'm not really hitting lower body. Obviously, it's super crazy right now because of the
yeah,
hamstring. But what it's supposed to be is, I think it's Monday. Shoot, let me think. I think it's like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or something. I got like a primary in each.
yeah.
That's what it's
It,
supposed to be, but
that's
it's not happening.
that's pretty much exactly what I make. I make it Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, so like very similar. And I was talking with Joe Bornstein and Phil Truong,
Mhm.
um, and they basically said the same thing, and it was just because we have like a reverse schedule where Saturday is like our busiest day like of the
Yeah,
week, and
yeah. I have.
yeah. Yeah, where they don't even lift on Saturday. I do like my tertiary bench on Saturday.
Yeah, I rest on Saturday too.
Yeah. And it's funny to, it's just something that like, I think a lot of coaches realize like shit, I don't even want to be lifting or I want to be in the gym for like an hour most on Saturday.
No,
Um
yeah, exactly.
when everyone else, who's powerlifting has their heaviest longest days on Saturday.
Yeah, and like everyone goes in at like a certain time, and I don't know when you go in, but I always try to go in like late morning. I'll wake up,
Mhm.
like do some things, um, and then like make sure I have like enough food and water in me. And then I'll go in pretty early to train. There's not many people there, and then like I'm not really getting many messages during that time. And then like I get home and like all of my athletes train in like the afternoon, and so it's just like blowing up my phone. Like if
Yeah,
I was
dude.
during that time, I'd be very distracted and also feel like I can't reply that well.
Yeah. That, which sucks because obviously it doesn't suck because I'm getting a lot of feedback. But what specifically sucks is that I do the same thing where I try and get very in and out on Saturdays, or I try and either lift at night on Saturdays when I know no one's going to be there on a Saturday night, or early in the morning. Um, because my gym does like what are like I train at Catalyst Strength, and so they have like Catalyst Saturdays, Cat Sats, where like it's a has become a social event every weekend, to like everyone train at the same time, which is awesome. But it's like sucks because it's not like responsible to participate in that because I need to I'm clocked in basically.
Yeah.
That entire day. Yeah.
I'm friends with a couple of like the gym staff members who are like PTs there, but they're into powerlifting too. And we basically always train in the mornings. So I'm trying to like organize like a kind of like that, like where we all go at the same time, but there's just like three
It's
of
just
us and the gym is
the
empty.
fitness professionals.
Yeah, so I can get some sort of like social hour in and it's fun. But then like if I like going at like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. when everyone gets off work, the gym's packed, it's a fun environment. But like my workouts are going to take twice as long.
Yeah, twice as long, and then now you've got a shit ton of messages to respond to when you get home.
Yeah, exactly. And then after the drive,
yeah. What was I gonna say? I only do that on week 4s because I've noticed that I'm just stronger at like 5 p.m. than I am at like 1 p.m. or 1 p.m.
I've noticed that too.
So I make the sacrifice where, but it's fun. I just wanted to hear this because I think it's another one of those things where you just do this long enough, you make that realization that you need to like actually lock in with your like life organization, and like everything needs to be dialed.
Yeah, I do. Everything like in my apartment, everything's so dialed. I've been meaning to make like a sleep video for a while, but it's almost like comical at this point, especially like as someone who struggles just like with sleep. I have like everything locked. Like we got like curtains over everything, like the blackout curtains I have drilled into my wall. And then I have other curtains over those, so like no light gets in. I wear like earplugs. I got 2 fans. We keep it at 62. We have like certain sheets. I have like all kinds of shit, dude. I have like nose strips. I have everything.
Dude, maybe I need to get on that. I've just been melatonin maxing. That's what I've been doing.
Dude, I've been taking like I took Benadryl for like a year straight, and I knew that like you're gonna get dementia from doing that, but it just helped me.
The hat man's gonna visit you.
Yeah, so I'm like, I actually didn't know you can get high off of Benadryl. Did you know that?
I did. I do. Well, I didn't. I discovered that during nursing school. I didn't discover it myself, but I don't know if you've seen like dude, there's like a subreddit for people who like take disgusting amounts of Benadryl and like try and like induce like hallucination.
Well, dude, yeah, that happened to me one night, and I didn't really because I was just like taking it, and I just
how many do you take?
Dude, okay, well, I have like the big ones. They're like these big blue ones, like the little pink ones.
Yeah.
I don't even know how many I took that night. I took
like the ones they give to horses.
Yeah, probably. I took like 4 of them or something, which is like just like way too much. It's like 200 milligrams or something.
Oh yeah,
that is. I was like, yeah, I was like, yo, my stomach like kind of hurts. So I looked up. I was like, how much Benadryl can I take? And it was like hallucinations might start around like 100 to 150 milligrams. I was like, oh, that's not good. And then like I was fine, but I woke up in the middle of the night like high, and I was like going to the bathroom. I was like, whoa. And then I like had some experience. I go to sleep. I wake up in the morning. I'm like talking to my wife about something the night before, and she was like, "Yeah, like that didn't happen. Like you were hallucinating." I just like,
oh goodness,
yeah, it was crazy. It wasn't anything like scary because I heard people have like very scary hallucinations on Benadryl. It was just like I saw my dog doing some stuff, and she's like, "No, like that did not happen." But I was.
That's fortunate though, because yeah, I've heard some people have some pretty scary stuff happen.
Yeah, I have too.
No more macrodosing Benadryl.
No, dude, I'm on to this new stuff. It's called doxysuconate or something. Apparently, it's a little safer long term, but
doxysuconate,
dude, it hits me so hard. I like microdose it every night, so I might be dead by like 40. But I try to like wean off it sometimes, and I do. I don't use it like every night, but I'll take it before big training sessions because I'm so in my head. I only train 4 times a week now, so I'm like I can take it 4 times a week at like half of a pill. I just sleep so insanely well on it. It just knocks me out. That I'm like, the session's not going to go well tomorrow, and I'm like kind of like anxious if I don't take the pill. So now I got like basically crippling mental withdrawals from it. So I have to take
it. Yeah, you have like an attachment to it.
Yeah, I have like a phobia if I don't take it that I'm going to sleep poorly and have a bad session.
Dude, I used to have that with like my like Gengar t-shirt on deadlift.
Yeah, I used to wear that all the time. That's so funny.
I need to start wearing it again. I don't know why I stopped as much.
Yeah, bring it back, and your hip will be fine.
That'd be lovely. Dude, my hip is actually completely fine. It's my low back right now.
How'd that happen?
I was like slightly fatigued going into a deadlift session, and then my back exploded.
Yeah, that's fun.
Basically, that's it.
Well, dude, literally, I strained my pec yesterday, which at least it wasn't a tear this time because I tore my hamstring like 4.5 weeks ago. And going into that, like, I just had like some stupid life circumstances. Like, I was sick, and I was like sick. You know when you get sick enough that like you're so stuffy and your nose is so runny and you're coughing that you can't sleep that well. So
Yeah,
basically, I slept.
that's the worst. That's like torture.
Yeah, I slept just horribly, and I was supposed to have like a max deadlift that day, and so I was like sick. Um, and I was also excited. And so like I woke up and I was just like, I can't sleep. And I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna go to the gym. And so like I went to the gym, and after like horrible sleep and being sick, and like warm-ups felt good and everything. So I was like, all right, we're sending it. And I went for it and just pop. And then with the pec, it's always sleep for me. This is why I'm like anxious. And the same thing with the quad. The night before I hurt my quad, I slept like an hour. So big thing there.
That's
But
not ideal.
I know, right? I gotta dial it in. But with my pack yesterday, and it's very minor. Like I'll be good to bench in like 3 days. But I just like minorly misgrooved a rep, not bad. It just floated back a little too much. Like that happens, and I've never had an issue with it. But I just slept like horribly because my wife and I slept in until like 10 the day before because it was like weekend, and I just like couldn't fall asleep that fast. So I was like, okay, whatever. Got up. I was like, like I have a secondary day. It's not super heavy. I'm a little bit fatigued, but like I'll just kind of like tempo it a little, feel it out. On the last rep, I just misgrooved, and like it's like in a weird spot too. It's like up here by my collarbone, so it's not like by my pec tendon. I should be okay. It feels pretty good today. I'll be good in like 3 days, but unfortunate.
Yeah, something that's nice about being a coach is that you have like the knowledge base to like heal yourself as fast as possible and navigate these kind of things, and that can lead to what feel like really painful and disastrous moments can mend in like a week or two.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 4 weeks post quad tear, and like I did RDLs pain free with 275 the other day, so I was very happy.
Yeah, that's gonna be helpful for getting back up. My takeaways from the recent issue were that I need to stay at this is like a risk management thing, is that I'm gonna stay at 3-week blocks until for maybe like 2-3 blocks until I've like built up enough heavy exposures that I feel like I could like actually I've had my toes in the water, and then I can actually take a week 4. And then when I do take that week 4 is to actually like have my week 1 and week 2 be at like the level of like volume that I program myself at, and then week 3 to like slash that volume a little bit, and then in intensity. So really just like get like only like basically to only get stimulating sets from my top sets and accessories on week 3, and then just like slash everything, like slash like my like specific volume and intensity on my back downs.
I think that's a good plan, but I've been doing something kind of similar. You're like just run weeks 1 through 3 over and over. I've been kind of experimenting with myself of just like kind of just like a week 2 or 3 for just like 8-10 weeks straight, and just not necessarily like empty the tank. Might just try it on myself. I don't know. It's kind of fun. I like wrote like a general 8-week.
I've been tempted to try that.
Like a general like 8-week block that I would like to give a shot soon, but I don't know. I'll probably do it honestly. But like, dude, 8 weeks seems like such a crazy commitment.
Yeah. I think you need like something to happen to like kind of drive yourself to try things like that, and it's kind of like one of those things like where people talk about like pacing their squat and deadlift differently, or like having like a squat focus block, having a deadlift focus block, things like that are like out of the ordinary often take like something happening where like, all right, fuck it, time to try this actually for once.
Yeah, no, I'm very much in that camp right now. I for a while too, like on my deadlift, I was making really good progress, like I said, but I was pulling like pretty frequently. Like I was pulling every other day. It was going great, but like the volume was pretty darn low every time. But, like hands down, deadlift progress in my life. Like my best pulls on kilo plates prior to that was like 300 kilos, and I would guess I was in like the 340, 345 range. And I'm like, okay, maybe even though I can somewhat get away with that if the volume is very low each session, maybe I should go to a more normal approach because I program no athletes like that, and I have a pretty big injury history myself. So maybe I should just dial it back a little bit, and I can get away with that until I can't.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to take your money and run.
Yeah.
I think that's like the approach that I'm going to take, because this last block before I popped my back was going like incredibly well. I felt like awesome. So, and I wasn't feeling like any fatigue at all up until like the end of week 3. So I know like what I have works. It's just that, you know, I need to go. I like, as long as I just like forego week 4, because I wouldn't have popped my back if I just went into a week 1 after that week 3. I only popped my back because I tried deadlifting 727.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which which was a learning experience for me, because typically if I injure myself or if I feel fatigued enough to a point that like I would have something like this happen, like I'd just be fatigued enough that like I'd be stopped out long before I'm capable of deadlifting like 600, let alone 727. So it was like a reminder that like just because I feel strong doesn't mean that like this is a dangerous amount of fatigue to be existing in right now.
Yeah, I get that. The take your money and run. Although sometimes, like in the same regard, but kind of opposite. There's certain days I look back on that I'm like, yeah, I was trying to be a good athlete. And like athletes, if you're one of my athletes, don't listen to this. Just ignore this, skip over this. Like there's some days I'm like, oh, I felt so good that day. I should have just sent it. Like, because then I was like a week away from an injury, and maybe I would have just like forced the injury anyway. But like certain things, like, oh, my like sleep was going well. Didn't know I was gonna have this like life event come up where I could sleep 1 hour and then tear my quad, and then like my squat PR stands for like 18 months now. I'm like, I was strong enough to squat 7 that day. Should have sent it.
Yeah, there's so many moments in hindsight where like you should have done, you could have done something, but you like, you know, were strict to following your plan. Like I absolutely could have just taken my week 4 and my week 3 on deadlift that block, and it would have been fine. And then, you know, I when I failed 7 on my primary in junior worlds prep, I 100 like I 100% for a fact know I could have squatted 700 on the secondary day prior to that primary day. I failed 700 because I just felt like a level of strength that I'd never felt in my entire life on that secondary that I ended up pushing too hard, and which is why my primary, you know, felt, because I've squatted 694, so I obviously know what a 6-pound difference feels like. And so I'm not just trying to like, you know, talk out of my ass when I say I could have said it. When I say I could have squatted 700 on a day, you know, I knew for a fact I could have. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes whenever I'll see people like posting, they're like, oh, like the secondary felt so good. The primary is gonna be insane. I'm like, your primary might not go as well as you want because like the secondary felt so good that like the primary is not gonna, like if it's an abnormally strong secondary, there might be a programming issue and like you're actually just feeling stronger that day, or you feel so good that you would feel good on the primary, but then you just overshoot like crazy and cook the primary.
It's good when both my squat days feel good. It was a case of like I was getting strong fast. It's just I went outside of my range. I need to keep the secondary day in, regardless of how I feel.
Yeah. How do your secondaries generally feel? Because like for me, as I've gotten stronger, like when I was younger, like things always like I don't even think I paid attention as much. Things like always felt pretty good, even though I was fatigued. Like it wasn't that bad. Like now on like a squat or a bench secondary, I'll like unrack the bar on like a bench sometimes. So I'm like, yo, why is the bar heavier? And like if it's that bad, I'm like, okay, we gotta like dial back a little bit. But like generally, even at like a red, I'll unrack a red and be like on squat, and I'm like, yeah, like this noticeably feels heavier, but I can still perform pretty well, and I feel decent. But then on the primary, I feel great. But like, what's your contrast there?
When I was younger, I definitely always noticed a difference on my secondary day, but performance wouldn't like falter that much. It'd be like maybe like a 10 kilo difference of like E1 or M. And then as I was getting stronger, that disparity grew largely. And then as I pulled my workload back to adjust to like my new ability, like work capacity, my work capacity, drew down as I got stronger. Then my secondaries actually started performing better because I just had like more recovery freed up. But with that being said, I'd say I'm probably like anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds weaker on my secondary deadlift, and like probably 100 to 150 pounds weaker on my secondary squat.
Okay, yeah, that's a big difference for sure.
Yeah, so
I'm not doing squat or deadlift right now, but like thinking back
at the moment, that is.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
I was very much in that camp too, and I think what I'm gonna try going forward though is try feeling a little more similar in each day, just injury prevention wise. If I'm not training under so much fatigue on a day, maybe that would help me. Maybe I'm just cooked, man. maybe I just got the injuries coming at this point, but I'm trying to tell myself that the body is resilient. I type that in my notes a lot. Like yesterday, I strained my pec, but I was like, hey, injury PR, mild strain, didn't tear, we're resilient. But we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that is that I squat and deadlift. Like my primary, I do my secondaries after my primaries on the same day.
Oh, so like if you squatted like a primary Monday, your secondary deadlift is on the Monday, and then vice versa Friday.
Yeah. So like on Tuesday, I have my primary deadlift, and then I do secondary squat afterwards.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm also changing to that myself because before I had them like spread out on different days, so I like it more. And like the day I hurt my hamstring, the day prior I hit like a heavy squat, like not that heavy, but like heavy enough that it probably influenced something.
I'd totally recommend it because for two reasons, and to decrease like frequency of like exposure to like lower lifts, as well as like loading into the erectors.
Mm-hmm.
And also it is just so nice to like create like a full distinction between like upper and lower days with powerlifting.
Yeah, I know. The lower days are tougher, but then the upper days are just so nice.
Mm-hmm. It gives you like a breath of fresh air, even on like hard upper days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but even like the hard upper days, like mentally, it's so much easier. Even if in the moment it's difficult or like a long workout, going into it being like, oh, I don't have to squat or deadlift today. It's just like it's just so easy going to the gym.
And then you go into your lower days and you just feel like kind of like a little sharper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine, I guess. I don't have a ton of experience with that, but like, do you mean like physically sharper or just like mentally you're like ready?
I feel like just like less exhaustion on average. I guess it's just like it's something that has helped lower fatigue, but also definitely mentally, in that like since I'm only having to do a lower lift twice a week, I feel like more motivated and less burnt out going into each squat and deadlift day.
That makes sense.
Where I don't necessarily feel burnt out, but I feel like lower. It's like I'm actually excited too, because I only get to do it twice a week. You know what I mean? It gives me something like anticipation, rather than like when I trained with like for junior nats and worlds prep, I would like do primary squat Monday, secondary deadlift Tuesday, secondary squat Thursday, primary squat like Saturday. or second primary deadlift Saturday. So I'd had everything like spaced out. And that worked, but ultimately, the reason I made this change is just because when I wrote my most recent blog, I was like, what would make training the most fun for me right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you find like you're self-coaching right now, right?
Yeah.
When you self-coach, do you find yourself making different decisions for yourself, like different coaching decisions than you would for your athletes? Because that's something I used to be really, really, really bad at. And then I got much better at it. But then I still do it to small degrees where like for none of my athletes would I be like, you were going to have a squat day the day before your primary deadlift. If we can avoid it, I would either have them on the same day or I'd space them apart. And like for myself, I was like, I'm just gonna like push more frequency because it's enjoyable and it's fun, and even if it complicates things and whatever, and then I just like do that and then I get injured.
I think I think something really important when you self-program is and this is like an indirect response to this, but I think it's probably the most important bit of information I could give someone who self-programs is that you should like, you hear the advice, you don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
You should not go into the, your spreadsheets with like super motivated to work out. You should like, I think you're better off obviously like giving yourself like a lower, like I think when you go into programming super motivated and wanting to like, like just like I'm gonna write the most fire next block and I'm gonna make so much progress with like this hard work, and it's gonna be, I'm gonna really dig myself down. I think that is when you end up writing something that's gonna like overly fatigue yourself or is gonna be unsustainable or is gonna injure you. When like I find that when you go into you write your program unenthusiastically almost, you actually end up writing something that is much more objective.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Especially like you can have like mental attachments to certain numbers. Like for an athlete, I'll be like programming, so I'm like, we're not touching 315, pal. Sorry, we're doing 310. Like I don't care. And
Yeah.
and then for myself, I'm like, yeah, like 200 kilos does sound kind of nice. Maybe I should program like 192, but I've done that for like triples before, so maybe let's just do 200, and then
Yeah,
you fall down that path.
you get carried away.
Yeah, especially because of my program lately, I've shifted from like the more AMRAP bodybuilder style of fun training I was doing for a long time, and I've changed more like a submax powerlifter program. But like, I will very much still have the mindset of like, like, is this a 4x4 PR? Even if it's like submax, and like wanting to always like add weight versus like lately I've been like, hey, like even if I'm repeating the same set of 5 on bench that I did last week, but it moved a little better, like sick. Take that as a PR too.
Yeah, it takes a long time to detach from that. Like on my secondary day, I do on deadlift, I do 2 singles with anywhere from 260 to 270. That's all I do. That's all I do on my secondary day. I was doing, and then I went into my primary on week 3, and I tripled 300 kilo. I mean, you saw the post, you commented on it. It was super easy.
Yeah.
And when I was 19 years old, I was doing 4x4s with like 270 just to deadlift like, high sixes.
Yeah, isn't that such like a hard mental shift at first?
It is. So I think it's something that like takes time to detach from.
Yeah, for sure. Dude, this is a record length podcast by like twofold, but I've had fun.
Yeah. It's been good. We've had a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to tell people like where to find you and all that info?
Yeah, I'm just on Instagram at Aidan Roeder, AIDANROEDER. Rage Strength is the name of my team name, and you know, I have some content on my page, and I plan on making some more in the future, both short term and long form, or short form and long form. Right now I'm a little busy right now in my life, so not going to come for a while. But I plan on making, you know, just useful content. So
Great.
so yeah, that's the only place I'm at is Instagram.
Yeah, so if you see those like burner profiles, it's not Aidan.
Yeah, yeah. No, if you get a DM from like rage strength 5473 and it has a copy paste message saying how we can boost your marketing tenfold, that's not me.
Oh, that's okay. I've gotten a couple of those. I thought they were you. My bad. Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, man. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course.